When I published my video about 7 tools I use every day for business analysis, I promised to demonstrate a few examples. Here is one of them. In this video, I will show you how you use Excel to manage a business glossary. Now, what is a business glossary? At a minimum, a glossary is a list of business terms and acronyms with their definitions. Ideally, it exists at the enterprise level, and then it may be captured across all divisions and different initiatives. Now, a glossary is one of those foundational artifacts that is at the heart of data governance of the company, and it helps maintain consistent definitions regardless of the project. Of course, sometimes you discover that there is no such enterprise glossary and there's nothing you can use. And then you start a business analysis on a new project and you have to start a glossary. You have to make sure that there is a common and shared understanding of those fundamental business concepts. Otherwise, there is no quality requirements. So what do? You start a glossary. How do you do it? Every time you hear a term, you ask what it means and you capture it. Every time someone mentions an acronym or you encounter an acronym in documentation, you look up what it means, and if you don't find it, you ask. If you hear about a metric, or if you include a new term and you're doing business modeling with your stakeholders, capture all of those in the glossary. The good news is you don't really need special tools to do that. A simple spreadsheet will work on most projects. In the future, if suddenly you end up with a more sophisticated tool that becomes available, such as a data governance platform, wonderful, you can port your glossary from Excel into this new tool. But until such happy times, a spreadsheet will do the job. The main advantage of a spreadsheet is that everyone is familiar with how to use them. So first of all, you can share it. Second, you can encourage your stakeholders and team members to populate it, correct it, and update it as necessary. Here's how you can do it. What I have here is a starter of a glossary for my hypothetical company, which I call the Great Insurance Company. For this glossary, I've selected several columns. A, B, and C are the minimum that you would want to see in any glossary. The one that captures the acronym, the term itself, and the definition. And as we talk through the rest of the columns, I'll explain when you might want to use them as well. So for starters, I captured a couple of standard insurance terms, such as accident and actuary. And in this case, I didn't make up the definition. I just went to the Insurance Bureau of Canada website. And this is an industry organization that publishes a lot of useful information for any insurance company in Canada, including a very extensive glossary. So first of all, whenever you put together a glossary, look up for standard terms that already exist. You don't always have to invent the bicycle. So these terms come from Insurance Bureau of Canada glossary. The next term, CGL, is also an acronym that stands for Commercial General Liability Policies, and there is also a standard definition provided by the same source. Next one, term. So for the term that stands for policy term, I am including the definition that is specific to the company. Sometimes a company may choose to extend standard terminology or have their own version of it. And in this case, when I'm talking about the period of time from the inception to the termination of an insurance policy, what I'm indicating here is that it is an internal term and it has a data owner. So this person that I made up, Director of Policy Administration, I'm assuming that this is someone in the business that is responsible for terminology and for explaining various terms related to the administration of the policies of the Great Insurance Company. And this would be the data owner that would define what policy term should mean, of course, in collaboration with respective stakeholders. And further to that, what I indicate is that potential valid values of what could be policy terms will be tracked as company reference data. So master source column can capture where do you find the master of each of these values. Since it's a reference data, it would be in wherever the Great Insurance Company manages all of its reference data, for example, reference data management system. In terms of valid values, I may indicate here that valid values for the policy term are actually dependent on policy class and type. And I am indicating that there is a reference table called policy term where this information is stored for the great insurance company. So these fields here provide some metadata that helps me understand where to look things up, how to understand valid values, and who to ask for more questions. The next entry, PRS, is a policy registration system. So this is an acronym specific to the great insurance company because it's the name of the system. Now, this is always useful to keep track of these because the acronyms used for system names seem to sound so similar, and in many large companies there will be lots of these acronyms. So it's always useful to define. Policy registration system, in this case, is used by great insurance company to register all of its policies. And it also has the owner. And further on, if you identify any fields or data elements that are managed in this system, you can also reference this acronym. The next entry I have is coverage, what the insurance contract covers. While this is also an industry term, different insurance companies may have their own interpretations of it. So my company in particular has coverage category reference table, which lists all of the possible values of the coverage that are valid and applicable to this particular company, because every insurance company may have their own business model. If you would like, and for some categories, you may not be able to list all the valid values here. No, you should. Instead, you can provide a few examples or simply provide a link to where to look up the complete list of valid coverage categories. In my case, I'm assuming that these coverage categories are stored in a reference data management system. However, most of the time we would want to have some kind of an interface where a business stakeholder is able to look up what are the valid coverage values. So this particular reference element may also be a hyperlink to help me to look up what are the valid values. What else I indicated here is, I indicated here that the data owner for coverage may be a data governance committee. It may be one of those very important business reference data that needs to be governed, because you want this to be very consistent, and there might be so many other processes and pieces of data that depend on the coverage and may be different depending on what coverage is in place, that I want to make sure that I govern this, and any changes to coverages are made in a very formalized and organized way, and this is where data governance committee may come in. The next entry I have is a policy identifier with an acronym PID. So this is just a data element, one of the data element, an attribute of a policy. And the definition again is specific to the company. It's a unique identifier assigned to each policy by the PRS, which by now we know is a policy registration system. So this glossary entry, first of all, will make sure that everyone understands what the acronym means. It will point that the master source of these policy identifiers is the policy registration system, PRS, that you should expect a 12-digit numeric identifier assigned by the system. And again, any questions to any changes need to be directed to this person, Director of Policy Administration, and it is their job to make sure that every policy is assigned a unique identifier, because it must be important to the business. And finally, the last example I have here is policy class. This is another example of reference data of a category of a policy. In my case, I said that it identifies whether the policy is personal or issued for an individual, or commercial, issued for a legal entity. So there's only two valid values, P for individual and C for commercial. This particular reference data will be also managed in a reference table, policy class reference table, in my reference data management system, because again, it is reference data, it's categorization of policies that must be important to the business, and therefore I also indicated that it will be managed by data governance committee. So these are just a few examples of different categories of terms that you may be tracking in your glossary. Now let's talk about what are some examples of when you need a glossary. Here are a few examples. Number one, you are implementing an off-the-shelf solution. You must share your business glossary with the vendor so that they can help you with the mapping and configurations. You have to realize that your company's terms and concepts may not match the terms of the product. Even such basic terms as customer, account, or contract may not be the same and may have different nuances of how they are interpreted. So you must have a glossary when you implement a COT system. Number two is capturing reporting requirements or requirements for a new dashboard. Every title, every label, every name of the series, every dimension must be defined, because you don't want the ambiguity or contradictions in those reports or charts or dashboards where the label means different things to different people. Number three, process analysis, process optimization. Imagine you are analyzing processes, you're capturing a process flows. So process names, the roles involved, the definitions of process triggers, every single factor that you mention as a condition, all of those need to be defined very clearly. They require precise definitions to make sure that your process analysis is also precise and accurate. Number four, data migration analysis. Now, this is always a major challenge and a pain for every project. Without clear definitions of data elements in your source, in the target, the whole migration exercise can fail miserably and can create even bigger data issues in your new system. Number five, imagine you're working on some data science predictive modeling initiatives. Your business stakeholders may be working with a data scientist. They have a hypothesis about the root causes of a certain event or phenomenon. To test that hypothesis, data scientists must collect the data, pre-process it, wrangle it, and then eventually build a statistical model and assess is there a correlation between these potential predictor variables and my target outcome. So before you do all that and collect and pre-process and wrangle data, make sure that you are using the right data. There should be a very clear understanding about what each of those variables, predictor variables, means. Otherwise, data scientists may be looking at the wrong data, or the business person may interpret the insights incorrectly. I could go on, but hopefully these examples are sufficient to persuade you that every project needs a business glossary. If you need a template, I included a link to a free Excel template below in the comments. Feel free to download it, modify it, add to it, and use it the way that works for you. And with that, until next time.